Hi, and welcome to the Thomas Padlan-Malm Hour. It's a place where I hope we can close the door and have conversations about ideas. It's where we can sort of have a small agora for smart people to come and think about what's happening in their communities and see how differently it could be managed if communities, each of the 435 or so individual seats in Congress, had someone sitting in it that had nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats or all of the money that's associated with that. And I want to tie it to an idea that I proved in 1993 to 1999 in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, where a town council that pretty much sat unchallenged election after election after election became the only election in the history of South Carolina in which every incumbent was defeated. And one of the newscasters who actually would phone my home from time to time, she was speaking before a group and was asked why that happened. And she said two words. She said, Tom Malm.
Echo and the emptied silo. There is a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when belief begins to loosen. It does not arrive during an argument. It is not triggered by statistics, nor by being proven wrong. It appears when life stops matching the story, when the grocery bill rises while prosperity is announced, when a professional who has always spoken up goes quiet, not because views have changed, but because noise no longer fits what is seen every day. When a loyal participant in a system is told, implicitly or explicitly, that they no longer count, and no clear explanation follows, these moments do not produce outrage. They produce dissonance. For a long time in this country, truth is verified through consequence. A harvest comes in or it does not. A business serves its customers or it fails. A government delivers mail, protects property, and enforces contracts, or it loses legitimacy. Slogans are not required to know whether something worked. Daily life makes that legible. Belief follows performance. Trust is built when promises and outcomes align. That feedback loop weakens over decades as decision-making moves farther from consequence. When consequence becomes distant, truth becomes easier to assert than to demonstrate. Performance is replaced by presentation. Institutions speak more loudly as they grow less effective, and citizens are asked to believe more fervently as evidence grows thinner. Volume rises not because success is near, but because failure is approaching and loudness becomes a substitute for accountability. Deception is permitted because systems have lost their censors.
Over the last few weeks, as I was putting together season 2 of Ignore Tom, I'd been communicating with a publisher about a couple of books that one would probably be really great this year if we could get it out by June. Otherwise, it just doesn't make financial sense. And the other would be great if I had a better turnkey following. I mean, in terms of marketing, I was really happy that we had that kind of conversation. The book itself is called A Voter's Audit. It says, a welcome from the author. I wrote this book for myself. More precisely, I wrote it to help me ignore my first reaction. When something feels wrong, the mind is quick to decide why. That impulse is natural. It's also unreliable. Over time, I learned, sometimes painfully, that my first response was often the least useful one. The work that mattered came from slowing down long enough to let outcomes speak before instinct did. And this book grows out of that discipline. It treats confusion as information rather than failure. It treats results as data. It asks not who's right, but what structure made this outcome likely.
At 78 cents, the U.S. first-class stamp is the lowest in the industrialized world. Compare it to France, at almost $3, and England at $2.50. And the longest distance those letters have to travel is about 600 miles, smaller than the state of Texas. We deliver from the tip of Puerto Rico to the tip of Alaska for 78 cents. That's a distance of 5,000 miles. So we sell the stamp at less than half the cost to travel 8 times farther. If we were to change the stamp price to 90 to 95 cents, which is still less than half of the cost of foreign posts, that would largely solve our controllable loss. And the stamp would still be the lowest in the industrialized world.
The way we fix the Postal Service's financial problems, short-term and long-term, is we do 2 things. One, we get rid of for the market-dominant products, which is a euphemism for monopoly products, ones where there are no competitions, ones where you have no excuse for losing money. With the market-dominant products, we eliminate the restriction on price increases that is tied to the consumer price index for urban consumers, which worked fine when there was no erosion of first-class mail. But their first-class mail has eroded over the last decade 34%, while the consumer price index for urban consumers has increased little under 17%, like 16.8. The law also says that we're supposed to be able, every category of mail is supposed to pay for itself, and the law is written so that that category can't. And that's why we're losing money. To be honest with you, when stamps were 25 cents, between the time they were 25 cents and 50 cents, if we trended the average household income as the limit for how we could increase prices so that it wouldn't change the value the Postal Service meant then and now. If we trended that, we would generate another $8 billion a year simply. If we trended the average mail letter cost of our top 5 European trading partners, we would add $26.9 billion annually. So if Congress wants to do the right thing and fix the Postal Service, they will eliminate, modify, change the restriction on what we can charge first-class mail so that it can at least approach what the threshold for pricing is in the global market, so that it can approach the kind of pricing that's experienced everywhere else in the world. And if they did that, we would be able to fund the pension for 200 years. And that's how simple this problem is.
In the big picture, we're going to talk about the United States. We're going to talk about elections. We're going to talk about how we are where we are and whether or not it's where we should be. We're going to talk about the individual powers of communities and individual American citizens. We're going to talk about the Constitution, the way it's written and intended to be interpreted. And we're going to have a little bit of a historical understanding that the heritage of America is 12 heritages at least.
A society cannot think better than its citizens. Institutions reflect the cognitive habits of the people who sustain them. When citizens reward confidence over accuracy, leaders perform. When citizens demand coherence over correction, systems drift. When citizens mistake loyalty for judgment, accountability dissolves. Self-knowledge is not private virtue. It is public infrastructure. Without it, freedom becomes fragile. Simple test. Cognitive self-knowledge can be practiced without theory by asking, how did I come to believe this? Who benefits if I do? What evidence would change my mind? Have I confused familiarity with truth? These questions are not ideological. They are hygienic. They keep the mind clear enough to function in a complex world. Self-knowledge clears the ground. Repair requires action. Because systems are not repaired by spectacle. They are repaired by people who understand themselves well enough to act deliberately.
Transforming of the United States Postal Service gives us a pretty good idea of what we can expect, a pretty good vision of the inadequate intellectual capacity and the political limitations and the hard wiring of what they believe their responsibilities and their priorities and their urgencies are. We have 435 members of Congress, each that represent between maybe 800,000 and 1,000,002 individuals in America, each from a part of the country that is absolutely unique. I've provided all of the things that we need in order to actually look at the Postal Service so that we're actually addressing the right questions. And the Postmaster General, number 76, he just in Congress exposed to the 435 seats in a public statement that said, we can't do our business and make our bottom line work because we have a product that's a monopoly product, and you in Congress created rules so that we cannot work and function the way we should, with excellence in service being the first priority.
One of the great temptations of modern America is to become a spectator of your own country, to watch everything, to react to everything, to repost everything, to risk almost nothing. Spectators know the players, the uniforms, the rivalries, the talking points, the scoreboards. What they rarely know is how the game is built. A citizen, by contrast, is interested in structure. A citizen asks what laws reward, what institutions tolerate, what markets distort, and what habits of mind make decline look normal. That is a very different posture. It is less exciting. It is far more useful. If you want a republic, you must prefer usefulness to excitement.
I recently saw a post that asked a really interesting question. How can there be fraud in government programs like SNAP, Medicare, Medicaid, EBT, home health care, and daycare assistance? Yet we're told there was no election fraud. At first glance, that seems like a fair point. But when you actually look at how these systems work, the answer becomes pretty clear. Let's start with benefit programs. These systems process billions of dollars every single day across millions of individual transactions. SNAP and EBT cards are used at thousands of retail locations. Medicare and Medicaid process claims from tens of thousands of healthcare providers. Home healthcare, daycare, medical transportation, these all rely on private contractors submitting invoices and timesheets. The vulnerability comes from scale and decentralization of money flow. A criminal can use a stolen identity to file a fake insurance claim. They can use a skimming device at a checkout register to steal EBT benefits. A dishonest contractor can bill for services never rendered. These are small dollar frauds happening across thousands of independent access points. And while the government catches a lot of it, some inevitably slips through. Now compare that to how elections actually work. U.S. elections aren't run as one central system. They're managed by thousands of separate county and local jurisdictions, each with their own ballots, procedures, and local oversight. Most use paper ballots or machines that create a paper trail that can be hand-counted and audited. Poll watchers from opposing parties monitor every step: signature verification, ballot opening, counting, transmission. And critically, voting machines are never connected to the internet during voting or counting. Here's the key difference. In benefit fraud, you're stealing money through many small, independent transactions over time. In election fraud, you'd need to alter thousands of physically secured ballots across multiple independent jurisdictions simultaneously, without being detected by bipartisan observers, paper audit trails, or chain of custody logs. One system moves money through thousands of doors, the other counts votes in thousands of separate, monitored rooms with paper receipts. The structures are completely different, which is why one is vulnerable to small-scale fraud, while the other has proven resistant to large-scale manipulation. Numerous investigations, audits, and court cases have confirmed this. Individual voter fraud occasionally happens and gets prosecuted, But widespread systemic fraud capable of changing an election outcome simply doesn't exist in the modern American system. Understanding the difference isn't about politics. It's about understanding how these systems actually function.
It's one of the internet's favorite financial parables, a simple graphic with a staggering implication. On one side, a 98-story glittering skyscraper dominating the Chicago skyline, completed around 2009. On the other side, a modern civic museum campus on the city's south side. Both carry a price tag of roughly $847 million. The internet's conclusion is instant. One man is a financial wizard who can bend concrete and capital to his will. The other is an inefficient bureaucrat who can barely manage a park. It's a compelling story, but money, like architecture, has a habit of hiding its real foundations. Let's look at the wizardry of the tower. In this case, the tower was built using a $640 million loan from Deutsche Bank, alongside hundreds of millions more from global hedge funds. The goal of this wizardry is strictly commercial. Sell luxury condos to billionaires, rent rooms to tourists, and lease retail space to high-end brands to pay off the massive debt. But what happens when the wizardry meets reality? For nearly 2 decades, the 70,000 square foot riverfront retail base of that very tower sat almost entirely empty, forcing tax assessors to slash its value. The building wasn't a magic trick. It was a highly speculative, high-debt commercial gamble that spent years tied up in bitter restructuring lawsuits. Now let's look at the other $847 million. A presidential library is not a commercial business. It does not sell luxury penthouses. It does not lease storefronts. It is a nonprofit civic anchor, a federally mandated archive, and a public park system. When you build a public museum to National Archives standards, the math changes. You aren't funding it with Wall Street loans that require a return on investment. You are funding it through private philanthropy and donations. The money goes into blast-proof security, climate-controlled preservation facilities for historic documents, open public plazas, and community infrastructure. To compare the cost of a public park and museum to a private condo tower because they share a price tag is like comparing a commercial cargo ship to a public bridge. They both use steel, but one is designed to make its owner rich, and the other is designed to let everyone cross the river. Psychologists often talk about a specific type of confidence. It's the comfort that comes from looking at a very complex financial equation, stripping away all context, and declaring the answer to be simple. It's the confidence that mistakes debt for personal wealth and civic infrastructure for a bad business model. We are often drawn to the narrative of the solitary genius, the master manager who can do more with a dollar than anyone else on earth. It's an intoxicating belief, especially for those who look at the world through the lens of a single internet graphic. So, when we look at these two structures, costing the exact same amount a decade and a half apart, we are left with a question. Who is the real architect of reality? The one who looks at the deep, tangled machinery of global finance and public works? Or the one who looks at a meme, nods knowingly, and thinks they finally have it all figured out?
Let me show you something that was posted by someone who has a doctorate in business education from Harvard.
We routinely trust average-waged, basic government clerks with full access to our social security numbers, banking details, and private information, but people are panicking because a literal billionaire tech genius wants to look at the database to see why 150-year-olds are getting checks.
Now, what I do know is that Doge did go in there and they did find people who were dead, who had to come back to the windows to the post office and send certified letters to prove that they were really alive and not needing to have their benefits cut to save the country money. I know that because I worked at the window. I know the disaster that they created for some people in their lives. But I also wonder how we can trust a degree from a Harvard doctorate. How can we trust a Harvard doctorate if they can't think past a meme that was designed for them just to post it without thinking.
If one company has access to the Social Security system's complete database, what could they discover about their competitors' private business relationships with competitors, customers, and the private details about the customers they use? An organization with legal access to the Social Security Administration's SSA complete database could gain extensive, illicit information that is impossible to acquire through legal means. The scale and sensitivity of SSA data would allow such a company to gain an overwhelming competitive advantage by exploiting the intimate personal and financial details of its rivals' employees and customers. How a company could exploit the data. The SSA database contains a vast range of information, such as lifetime wage and earnings records, employment history, names, dates of birth, parents' names, addresses, and medical and financial details related to disability or benefit claims. With access to these records, a company could take the following actions: discover rivals' key personnel and vulnerabilities, identify star employees, access to lifetime wage and earnings histories could reveal the most productive and highly compensated employees at a rival firm, allowing the company to target them for recruitment. Expose vulnerabilities for sabotage. By examining the medical records and financial history of key personnel, a company could uncover damaging information that could be used for blackmail or to destabilize the competitor's leadership. Target employees with financial insecurity. A company could use information on benefit payments, financial distress, such as supplemental security income filings, and medical conditions to identify employees with vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Reverse engineer competitors' business strategies. Identify customer demographics. By accessing the data of individuals associated with competitors, a company could analyze and replicate their customer base. This information could reveal crucial details about a rival's target demographic, market segments, and geographical reach, which is data typically gathered through legal and time-consuming market research. Uncover undisclosed relationships. The data could reveal previously unknown professional relationships or business associations, as well as family connections that could expose a competitor's strategic ties. Exploit customer data for financial gain. Engage in identity theft. A company could use the sensitive data, including social security numbers, dates of birth, and financial details, to commit widespread identity theft against its rivals' customers. Execute targeted marketing scams. Access to detailed financial and health data would allow for the creation of extremely personalized and manipulative marketing campaigns, targeting vulnerable customers with products and services based on private information. The consequences of such a data breach. Unauthorized access to the SSA database would be a catastrophic violation of privacy laws and have profound consequences. Widespread identity theft and fraud. The scale of a breach involving the SSA database would lead to unprecedented levels of identity theft, affecting millions of Americans and creating a national crisis. Damage to public trust. The incident would erode public trust in the government's ability to protect sensitive personal data. Thinking is not automatic. Most people believe they are thinking when they are reacting. Reaction is fast, thinking is slow. Reaction relies on familiar pathways, ideas repeated often enough to feel true. Thinking requires interruption. It demands that assumptions be surfaced and tested. That work is uncomfortable, which is why it is so often avoided. In stable conditions, this avoidance is survivable. In changing conditions, it is dangerous. The limits of intelligence does not protect against error. Highly intelligent people can be deeply wrong if they never examine how they know what they know. Education sharpens tools. It does not guarantee their proper use. Experience builds confidence. It does not ensure relevance. Cognitive self-knowledge begins with recognizing this limit. What matters is not how smart someone is, but how willing they are to question their own certainty. Belief without examination is delegation. When people accept ideas without examining their source incentives or consequences, they are not exercising judgment. They are delegating it. Delegation is not inherently bad. Societies require trust, but trust without periodic audit becomes dependency. Over time, people stop knowing why they believe what they believe. They defend positions they did not arrive at and cannot explain. This is not ignorance, it is abdication. A citizen who does not examine their own beliefs is not neutral. They are vulnerable. Self-knowledge requires friction. Cognitive growth does not occur in comfort. It occurs when an explanation fails, a trusted source disappoints, or a long-held belief no longer fits reality. These moments feel disruptive because they are. They interrupt habit. They force reassessment. They create the conditions for thinking to resume. Avoiding these moments preserves comfort. Engaging them restores agency. Why this is a civic responsibility. A society cannot think better than its citizens. Institutions reflect the cognitive habits of the people who sustain them. When citizens reward confidence over accuracy, leaders perform. When citizens demand coherence over correction, systems drift. When citizens mistake loyalty for judgment, accountability dissolves. Self-knowledge is not private virtue. It is public infrastructure. Without it, freedom becomes fragile.
What if the most honest person you know decided to build a media empire? Thomas Padlan-Malm's story begins with an uncanny moment. 3 separate friends sent him the exact same note. "You're the most honest person I know." That phrase traced back to a first-grade teacher's declaration in front of 2 classrooms and stuck with him across decades. That reputation became the seed for something larger, a strategic vision called Mission Possible. When Thomas submitted that plan to reform America's postal system, the USPS Board of Governors replied, validating his work and giving public weight to an idea born from simple, repeated trust. From that honest foundation comes a media project rooted in credibility, curiosity, and service.
There are 4 areas that you need to investigate anytime you have trouble meeting your goals in any strategy. The first is your information. The second is the structure in which that information flows. The third is who you put in the position to make the decisions from the information that you've given in the system that you have. And the fourth is what motivates the decision. Now, in one of my books, I talk about sitting in the Wilmington, Delaware train station. They remodeled it since they moved the benches around in a different way after COVID-19. But at one time, you would sit in rows and there was an aisle and one side would face the other. So I was sitting waiting for a train from Wilmington to Philadelphia to spend the afternoon in Philly. Very convenient, public transportation, easy to get in and out, brilliant. But as I sat there, 3 women, dressed as if they had just come from an important meeting, sat down with their luggage and their bags and their suitcases and their computers and their stuff. Opened up the computers, got their phones, and then they talked about, just the weekend and their vacations and what holidays they have planned and this thing or that thing about one kid or another. And eventually, they talked a little bit about the meeting that they had. Not much, but very little bit. I gleaned from it that they were Bank of America, and they were in Wilmington to figure out how the marketing team could communicate to the bank's customers that it's a good thing we've closed down the bank next to their house so that they have to drive 15 miles to continue to do business with us. And that's brilliant because, if we cut costs and our customers, they're our customer, now we just cut costs and everything's going to be good. Well, so they're in there having this conversation. And then the boss, and I got the sense that she was rather new from the conversation. She said, "Why did they fire him?" Big dead silence, and then, "But they hired me, but they didn't tell me why they let him go." The two are sitting there for a while. Finally, one lifts her head out of her phone and she says, "Well, maybe he was just kind of all over the place." Now, when the person asked the question, she didn't ask her employees if they liked him. She didn't ask them how loyal they were to them. She didn't ask him if he was good at what he did and helped them be successful too. And in this case, this woman sitting in the seat talking to her two employees after a meeting where they're talking about why they're losing customers, and she asks why her boss is fired, and they're just mystified that anyone would think that would be an appropriate question there in the train station. And the new boss said, "Well, if you hear anybody talking about things I should be doing different, you'll let me know, right? We're going to make a pact, right?" The first employee who replied said, "Well, and this was June or July, I'm only on contract until the end of the year." Meaning, if I want to stay here any longer than the end of the year, if I want a contract renewed and I see an opportunity to help myself, my pact was with my family. But then again, I don't know that that's what the new boss heard. The other woman heard it, and she said, "I'm in the same position." So, this is what corporate America looks like. And this is the model that was rebuilding the United States Postal Service when I was there. And this is the problem with corporate America in general. They don't understand their job. If I were Postmaster General, I would start, as soon as I was named, I would ask every one of the Postal Board of Governors to meet me here. And just walk through a day where you get to see what the job is and what the impact of all the changes that have been made have been. I'd meet with them here and walk through the day and show them how changes and how accountable mail has changed, has affected customers, show them how the plans for handling packages affect things, show them the impact on our commercial carriers who are the job providers in a capitalist society, show them the impact that we're having on their ability to hire and grow. And as a customer said to me just 2 days ago, "Yeah, boy, I went over to UPS and they tried to rip me off. They almost wanted twice as much as you're asking." Because for a for-profit company, that's what it takes to do the job. We're the Postal Service of the United States government, and our job is to support as infrastructure the success of all the other businesses in America. That's our job, not to compete with them. Now, when I worked at the window at the Lincoln University post office, a woman, a student there at the school, came right after the 2016 election with this beautiful cap that said Trump on it, and sparkly F Trump. And when she came to the window and she put that on her head, of course, I see that as vulgarity. I see that as a word that stops conversation. So I asked, "So what good does that do?" Now, I listened to what she said, And I understood all of it. But I also understood it wasn't going to get us anywhere. Instead, I asked, why don't you ask people why they feel that way? And you might be surprised by the answer. When I worked at the Lincoln University Post Office, I wrote a book that is one of the books with the publisher that we're trying to figure out when we can launch it. And that all has to do with the phone call that they gave me after I sent my first book, which was called Patriotic Capitalism. The second book was called America Through the Window. And right now it stands as a time capsule of where we were during election year 2016 in one of the most diverse communities on the planet that work. Now, this isn't the first series that I've produced. I had a series last year called Ignore Tom, and it focused primarily on what we need to do to make mail delivery in America meaningful again, and the path to that I recommend and have been recommending for about 6 years at the expense of about $30,000 of my own money to the leaders and decision makers in Washington, from Capitol Hill to the White House, to the Regulatory Commission, to the Postal Board of Governors, to the union leaders. And basically, what we're doing at the Postal Service as we tried to fix it is fixing it the wrong way. What I discovered as I was trying to help the Postal Service is they were looking at the issues from the bottom line, from the financials, and trying to fix them that way. And that's a lot like when the U.S. military started dogfighting and technology brought us to the air battles and war, and airplanes would get shot down, but the ones that would come back, they would inspect them and they would look at where they were vulnerable, and they would reinforce all those vulnerable places, and those guys would go out and sometimes they wouldn't come back. And then somebody occurred to them, oh, wait. If the planes are coming back with holes in them, that means the places where they're getting hit aren't where they're vulnerable. The people who I'm inviting to this directly, and this is not going to be a mass market project, this is not going to be clickbait, this is not going to be, the people who I'm inviting directly are people who I know are smart enough to understand what I'm talking about, because all of them are smarter than me. Back in the day when, the agriculture in the South was managed through human capital, the purchases of human beings, human capital, that's what that means, capital purchases for humans. And I only make that point because when I started working in the 70s, I was hired by the personnel department, and then somebody decided they could make a profit center from human resources. And we became human resources until we decided that we needed to choose whether we were going to have humans or machines doing jobs. So do we make a capital purchase, or do we make a human, or do we have human capital? And we measure the two of them. Now, this isn't wrong. This isn't moral. This is information. And you don't have to like it, but it's information. What do you think they're building humanoid robots for? What do you think this is all about? So now you have a problem with it. What happens to the people who don't have to go to work anymore? How do we take care of them?
Do you realize there are things about you that can be safely concluded by seeing you only once? That is because the human brain constantly registers and guides you, so you can focus on the dynamics of living. It runs patterns while you run life. Let's watch it work. Motor skills, intelligence, moral contemplation, memories. Billions of synapses coordinate what to do next, and what can wait. Some circuits fire, others stay quiet. Together, they shape how you move, think, and choose. As life unfolds, your brain changes. Active paths strengthen, dormant ones fade, Ever reach a stoplight and barely recall the last miles? Your brain sifts the flow, forever, for a while, or not at all. Autopilot protects attention. Rhythms conserve effort. Patterns persist. Right sock, right shoe, left shoe. Near certainty you repeat it tomorrow, next week, years from now. Genetics set ranges. Environment tunes signals. Culture shapes meaning. Experience reinforces pathways. Active and dormant synapses shift with life. We are not helpless, just human.
And take a look at the power we have. I got married in a facility on a street named for a transformational mayor who was asked by one of 3 men who met me every Wednesday evening to talk about who should run our town for about 2 years. And I lived in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. The first time his name ever came up to be mayor came up in my house in a meeting that ended with someone saying, well, who's going to ask him? And it was interesting how that happened. I was asked in a town where the elections are nonpartisan. I was asked if I would mediate the campaign managers of 5 individual people who were vying for 4 different seats. And the people who managed their campaigns came to there were 3 men, 5 campaigns that came to my house every Wednesday so that I could mediate a conversation about how we were going to succeed. And that's kind of what I want to do with the people here, to talk about how that's done so that every district in the United States can send someone that does not have a party affiliated to their name. And then long-term goal, long-term vision is for us to stop electing Republican and Democratic dog catchers and understand that the states have equal power constitutionally with the federal government, and that the state governors have power amongst themselves to actually rewrite our Constitution, to have a constitutional Congress, as it were. And we need to ask ourselves the same question. If my state is able to send someone to its state capital who's not a Republican or a Democrat, who's focused only on what this state needs, why would I elect someone beholden to the money that makes one powerful as a Republican or makes one powerful as a Democrat? Now, a lot of practical, smart, intelligent, educated people would say something like, wow, that costs a lot of money. Costs nothing. It was the other really important rule that I work by. Now, modern psychologists say that we have 2 emotions, fear and love, and all other emotions attached to those. Now, never read any of the peer-reviewed studies. I've never heard any of it. I just know that if I use that as a tool, it forces me always to hear people who are arguing with me and ask, what are they afraid of? What is it they're afraid of?
I want to ask a clean question. Do American interests improve when private donors give big gifts? Before I answer, I need to define terms. Lower costs, stronger institutions, fair access, national security, democratic legitimacy, taxpayers, users, workers, future generations. Now the offer on the table. Airplanes ballroom donations totaling $1 billion. What problem is this meant to solve? Is the need urgent or just desirable? If the donor didn't appear, would this be the top use of public funds? What comes attached? Naming rights, access, scheduling, priority, data policy, influence. Governance vetoes, advisory seats, soft power privileges. Is there a maintenance tail? Fuel crews insurance, upkeep depreciation that taxpayers quietly inherit? Who decides acceptance? An elected body with open minutes or a private board with closed doors? Donor identity intermediaries, foreign ties, ultimate beneficiaries. Does anti-corruption law fully apply, or does philanthropy create a carve-out? What is the opportunity cost? If we accept 1B in kind, do we reroute public dollars away from higher return projects? Does it tilt priorities toward visible prestige? Airframes, ballrooms over invisible basics like safety maintenance wages? How is risk allocated? If an aircraft becomes obsolete or grounded, who pays? If the ballroom sits underused, who admits the error and unwinds it? What are the distributional effects? Do benefits cluster in a few zip codes while costs spread nationally? Are small competitors crowded out because they can't match donor leverage? What is the precedent? If one donor buys the hardware, do future budgets expect philanthropy to backfill essentials? Does that weaken the case for steady, accountable public funding? What is the test for capture? If the policy outcome the donor prefers reliably follows the gift, is that charitable or political by other means? Do we have a red line where any single source gift is capped, sunsetted, or matched by diversified funds? Finally, compared to alternatives, is there a cleaner path? Competitive procurement, transparent bonds, user fees, open philanthropy pooled through blind trusts. So my resolve is simple. Accept only when the gift passes 4 screens. Clear public need, full cost accounting, zero governance strings, transparent process. If anyone fails, I'd say no, even to $1 billion, because the price of a free asset can be permanent dependence. And American interests should be durable, not donated.
In America, we have been given the power to take care of ourselves. Before the baby boom generation, American citizens always did. But during the 1970s, under a plan that seems to have been intended to fund individual wealth from our grandchildren's futures, we have relinquished the media to the immigrants and foreign investors so that what we view can be normalized as a rallying point for sides against each other. Any vision for America's future as a free capitalist nation should focus on equipping communities with actionable strategies that ensure their economies keep streets paved and safe. The workforce, the engine of a strong economy, is not compromised in its ability to grow and advance the company's good that ensures the family's good. A challenge to America's African American population and economy is how their mass has become the 3rd largest minority over the last generation. Language like black jobs has become normal again, and ignorance has led the U.S. Postal Service into the single most wasteful foolishness in history. First, let's understand the current challenges. The U.S. economy faces stagnation due to institutional dependence. Traditional planning is ineffective. Only 4% of organizations engage in it. Now, let's explore the HBCU network's potential. This initiative empowers HBCUs to lead civic infrastructure reform. By using their analytical skills, they can design effective systems. They can work from the postal districts, where they are in independent research and ideation, competitively. They can engage the service fraternities and sororities, who provided the educations of so many postal system leaders and decision makers. Next, we focus on creating a self-funding postal network. The vision must understand that Louis DeJoy's remark that letter mail cannot compete with digital is exactly wrong. We must have swift mail to elevate commerce. We cannot have the CPIU regulate the price of stamps, because the price of stamps, just like petroleum, affect the cost of every transaction in society. It cannot be held in check by a value it influences. The first step is implementing globally established threshold pricing. This model will ensure our services are financially sustainable. Then, we address local commercial opportunities. Every post office can tap into neglected resources local to its district. This will make each location self-sufficient and accountable. It's crucial to involve stakeholders actively. Engage communities in discussions about their civic infrastructure. This turns passive observers into active participants in their destiny. Additionally, understanding the importance of accountability is vital. A workforce-owned cooperative model fosters responsibility and precision. This directly impacts the local economy positively. Summarizing key points. HBCUs can lead the way. They'll turn post offices into self-funding entities. Stakeholder involvement is crucial for success. Encourage everyone to apply these insights. Let's reclaim our civic infrastructure together. The future of our economy depends on this initiative.
When the United States of America primarily welcomes those fleeing totalitarian regimes, it builds a population with a different hardwired cultural understanding from those born here. It is prudent to not ignore what this might bring. We ask, when people escape a structure, has its blueprint for what normal is been embedded in their thinking? Human biology adapts to its environment from birth. When a mind is conditioned by authoritarian survival, it develops a synaptic expectation. It looks for strength. It seeks a known hierarchy. The capacity for abstract political thought is not evenly distributed. Data reveals a rigid truth. Only 7% of any population carries the cognitive weight required to sustain abstract democratic theory. 68% cannot process the weight of a new idea. They follow the established momentum. Free will remains, but the anchor is gone. Civics is no longer taught as a core discipline in public education. Simultaneously, the Telecommunications Act of 1996 stripped away public interest monitoring from the media. Without civic literacy, voting shifts from foundational law to raw consumer behavior. As Thomas Padlan-Malm observed, people are rarely opposed to despotism. They simply want their despot. This fulfills George Washington's parting warning regarding the cycle of alternating despots. A society cannot be smarter than its average citizen. Market curves dictate both purchasing habits and political alignment. Demographic shifts are accelerating. Populations arriving from generations of authoritarian governance are entering a system where educational standards are actively declining. The predictable result is a search for familiar architecture. They do not seek freedom in the abstract. They seek a figure stronger than the ones they left behind. Peter Drucker noted that new ideas are infants, fragile, easily crushed, and rarely maturing as planned. One size never fits all, yet the system forces a binary choice. Today, every 1 million Americans share a single seat in Washington, a duopoly never granted by the Constitution. For the 7% watching, the calculation is clear. The architecture is shifting back to its default state.